So let's move on to the next presentation. We have Kevin Kumpf. He is the Chief OT ICS Security Strategist at Cyolo. Mr. Kumpf is experienced in security architecture and has more than 20 years of IT security and compliance experience, including work in cybersecurity, governance, and critical infrastructure experience, working in the energy, medical, manufacturing, transportation, and FedRAMP realms. Thanks, Kevin, for participating, and I will turn it over to you if you're ready.
I am ready. Thank you. So welcome, everyone, and thank you to be here. I know it's a 3 o'clock on a Tuesday, and I just want to say that I know there isn't a lot of time for this, but we've heard a lot of good content today and a lot of good details. What I'm going to do is show you the art of the possible, as we call it here, and why it's important. So with that said, I do have a short presentation here on slide material of what we can do as an overall community, not just Cyolo, but a community here of partners, of vendors, working with the industry, our governments, our global leaders to help solve this challenge. And I want to thank Tim and the community here for sponsoring this today and giving us really a forum to help you understand that we are trying to solve the problem and that it's going to take all of us. So the one word I want to really drive in on this slide is safe. And it's really very positive to hear some of my other presenters today talk about safety. I don't know how many conferences I've spoken at, roundtables I've been on, or presentations where I hear others talk about we're secure, we're secure, we're secure. Without the safety, there is no security. And so that, to me, is the most key individual word on this slide. The overview of what we've been asked for. But take this with a grain of salt, because from my perspective, we're not solving just for an island 1,000 miles away from the continental US. We're solving for real-world challenges on site, in the cloud, isolated, remote areas. No matter what the organization, we need to be able to deploy efficiently with scalability and safety. These are the key points that we were asked to overview today and an understanding of the background. The last point on this slide to me is the real important component of the architecture. Concerned about supply chain ensuring adequate raw materials arrive. This is truly just-in-time manufacturing. The other key component that goes with it is having high-quality power, water, raw materials. This ties into the transportation. This ties into the suppliers downstream. And I'll give you a prime example. If I had a milk plant that was compromised and they had to have me stop production, I don't just impact myself. I impact the trucks that are coming in that evening, the next day, days after that are filled up with milk that now have nowhere to put that. I impact the farmers downstream that have the cows that have produced the milk, the suppliers of the feed and other services to keep those cows healthy. So when we have an event or an incident, and there is a difference that we look at entities and state what happens in this scenario, we must not just look at the one entity impacted. We must look at the entire supply chain. And that is why the last point is so critical. The outcomes that they wish to achieve based in their environment, if any event hits, be it a hurricane, tornado, typhoon, whatever they're going to have happen to them, we can't look at it and say it's just going to be a couple of weeks that they may be down, because there are portions of the US that have still not recovered from Hurricane Katrina. Areas that, based on what they do, who lives there, and other financial factors, have said, are we going to rebuild or not? If this entity has one manufacturing plant across the globe, if they are down for significant time, weeks or more, that could put the entire company at risk, and then there's no reason to open this facility again. And so we really need to understand that uptime and availability is key. So we want to give them military-grade security. And I think this is important because in the government space, even though we have basically the DoD, the Civ, and all these other areas that are the blend of civilian versus military at the highest level, we have to look and say, do they deserve a different solution, or do we have to treat them all the same? Because if we only protect our contractors that make our airplanes and fighter jets, downstream, there are other entities that are not tied to that are making widget parts. Those widget parts may be for general aviation as well. So we have to look at everything as a critical entity that deserves the highest rate of security. The next point is operational safety and survivability. Reducing the risk of life-threatening incidents. This is critical. I have customers that on average, they will lose 3 to 4 employees a year due to workplace accidents. At this point in time, it is generally other items like forklifts, things falling, events of that nature. But I do not want any product in the industry, any vendor in the industry, to have to put out that their software failed, causing a human life catastrophe for anybody. Lastly, we want to look at the availability. Uptime is key. So as we're looking at the uptime of these systems, we have to take the whole ecosystem in. And in this scenario, we've been asked to say an entire island, and everybody works for this factory facility. And by that, I mean the traffic systems, the shipping systems, the port systems, the education. All of these are needed. And when you put this all together, it is now an ecosystem. So when you talk critical systems availability, you're talking really that ecosystem and everything that feeds it or supports it or thrives from it. The last thing we want is we want flexible, centralized management. We've heard a lot of discussions, in our private lives and our business lives about, well, all you have to do is add this and then add this and change that. The easy button is the way society needs to work today. As we've heard on discussion before from panelists and in their presentations, IT can take the approach of just one click, Patch Tuesday, here we go. OT, Patch Tuesday is a non-starter. And that's because we need the ability to be flexible in our centralized management, approach it how we need to approach it for our environment, and not take a blanket approach that one click does it all. We also need to be hardware agnostic for this entity. I cannot tell you what platform they are running on. I cannot tell you what their maintenance contracts are. To inject something into their environment that now we have to say, hey, for survivability, you must buy X on this platform, based that they're an island of 1,000 people with a limited IT support staff, adding another type of platform into their environment that is not open and flexible and VM agnostic on that area really can cause them challenges. Real life example, I was working with a customer last week that said, by the time I'm done, I will deploy over 3,000 instances of your product in my environment. I cannot support them with the team I have on that operating system. Great, let's move it to another platform, and we did for them. That's called understanding your environment and working with your partners and vendors. User experience. Agentless is key. The agentless part comes from we can't run agents on many of the platforms as we have heard, but also from just like ZTNA or AI or other terms out there, as soon as you hear the term agent, people immediately put their hand up and say, I can't put another one in because people have agented me to death. Every single system package out there needs an agent today. And lastly, in that experience area, even though we are talking in federal entities, there is BYOD coming in, and this is to the contractors and other people that are coming into your facilities with their laptops, with their custom software to do work maintenance on PLCs, HMIs, sensors, actuators, whatever is in their environment. You are not going to hand them all a laptop in many instances. Additionally, the flexibility of what we've built into our environment here with Cyolo allows contractors and others to go over to a cradle, pick up a tablet, log in, get the applications that they need for that moment in time, and then put the tablet back in the cradle for somebody else to use. So the flexibility is coming to the space, but it is an acceptance of this, not the norm at this point. Compliance, we have the alphabet soup of compliance. The benefit is that if you develop your platform properly, and if you develop it with defense in depth, security, best practices, understanding your customers, you can reach the rigors of any of the standards that you need to meet for compliance. And that is factual, having had to do the crosswalks for NERC-CIP, ISO, IEC, NIST, and sit down with auditors from each and every different area and say, here you go. I started to work back and said, what is really the difference here? And what it came down to was the rigor, encryption, and other areas that, if set at proper strength levels, everybody can be satisfied. The last piece of this is you need your logging, forensics, and ITSM. Now, I know people are scratching their heads and going, why would we need a tool like a ServiceNow and OT? But when you are just-in-time access, when you are users that are ad hoc, come into a facility, or transient, having a way to schedule, to know what the user did, to log what they did, to individualize what they did, and even record what they did, and then tie that back to a change system is critical. This is not stating that OT needs to put in an ITSM. This is stating that the models that you're hearing out there now with Zero Trust and with other vendor-specific visions are allowing IT tools to be used in OT mindsets. And lastly, flexible deployment models. On-premise, fully, hybrid, which means in the cloud or on-premise or both, isolated and remote, meaning you can take this system, put it on a wind turbine, a solar array, anything that this island has is key. You also want it to have low bandwidth. So if the data network is down, you can plug in a cell modem to get it across to the areas of need. If that is down, you can go to 3G, even a dial-up modem to ensure what you can do are all options that we have tested and worked with in our environment. And small form factor. Once again, being able to pick up a unit and go is critical. And as other of our announced partnerships, we actually just partnered with Dragos as completing their 5 pillars. And one of the key components is that they will be able to use our technology in an incident response. So if an island like this, where secluded semiconductors resides, gets hit, boots on the ground can be instantaneous and immediate. So how did we get here? How did we get to where OT, which has been around with systems for 40 plus years, really have become critical? Well, the attacks on the infrastructure are on the rise. None of us can deny that. We can't sweep it under the rug. And we also can't turn around and tell those people that put in a system last year for millions of dollars that it needs to be patched, and it can't be, because there is still equipment coming out, brand new off the production line, that cannot be patched because the firmware, software, other systems for it are 15 to 20 years old. This has made the hackers realize that if they have a low-hanging fruit that can be accessed through a weakness in another door, and that door could be IT, that door could be a contractor laptop, that door could be a phone home device, or as I call them, IoT devices, not Internet of Things, but Internet of Threats. The attacks are on the rise and hackers are enjoying it. The other part that's driving this is digital transformation. Notice that I talk about it as interfacing. I have a whole presentation that I've given numerous times over in Europe about we do not integrate. If you integrate, that is mixing flour and water together, and I ask people, can you ever pull those apart? If you ask an auditor and you say, I've just integrated these systems together in my electronic security perimeter, physical security perimeter, are they all in scope? You know the auditor is going to immediately say, oh, absolutely they are. So we need to, just like understanding the concept of ZTA, ZTNA, or any other term that we're putting out there as the panacea and savior, we need to use the proper terms about interfacing versus integration. Another area, we are disrupting or manipulating these systems, posing real harm. If any of you have noticed, the water industry was recently attacked. A tank was overflowed. The individual that was in charge of it said, no harm, no foul, nobody was hurt. The hackers out there take that as try it again. Because when you stand there and you say nothing was damaged, nobody got hurt, well, that's great. It was an attack. There was a breach, and they will be back. So those type of things are growing, and this is where we have to educate and understand and really decide attacks, incidents, and events all have meaning, all have context. I think the biggest part on this slide here is the last 2 points. A lack of confidence in the tools commonly used by IT. There is a huge distrust between IT and OT. If you walk around a facility, go to a conference, you can tell the IT versus the OT people. We need each other. People are not jumping into the OT bandwagon for a security career, knowing they can go out, take a certificate in high school, a couple courses in college, and be making 6+ figures working in the cloud in IT. They're not going to put on a hard hat, their steel-toed boots, and walk around the floor in a safety vest and earn lesser money and give that up. So we have to embrace that we are going to have IT resources working with OT. The biggest challenge is IT and OT are not viewed equally at the C level. And if you want a true example of that, go talk to a plant manager who understands the OT environment, who understands what's going on, who understands their systems and how things function, and say, you were called up to the C level to explain to them what you need from a budget purpose and how it works. No. They're going to be told to tell the CIO or the CISO, and they will interpret it, and they will prioritize it based on their projects. Additionally, if a hole in the roof has to be patched because OSHA says we're going to fine you for this, that hole in the roof will get patched before any security dollar is spent, because there is real responsibility and accountability. And I've told people numerous times, if you truly want to stop the letter dropping of DHS, EPA, TSA, all these orgs, the entity that makes facilities move and take notice is OSHA. Putting this underneath that type of entity would be a huge panacea for many people out there. So what does the new Zero Trust maturity model of pillars really look like? Well, we've had great explanations today of the 5 pillars. But if you notice, the second step up is automation and orchestration. This is key, but also needs to be defined. Uncontrolled automation is not something you want to put into an OT environment. Let me state that again. Uncontrolled automation is not something you wish to put into an OT environment. If a bottle is coming down a production line, it is filling with a substance, that line is automated to the point where it knows when to stop, knows how to spin the bottle and put the cap on, knows exactly where to put the label. In the security world, we We don't have those controls in the OT space. So if a person is mixing chemicals in a environment and you disconnect their session because you feel that they're doing something nefarious, automatically, you can have grave risks to that environment. And that can kill people. So automation is important, but as the AI guidance and others have come out, human in the loop is what we really want to have tied to the platforms. Additionally, the orchestration piece. SOAR and SIM are wonderful tools in the IT world. They have people that understand them. There is no reason they can't be used safely in the OT environments for collection of data and for tasks such as adding a new user, updating a password, enforcing a policy and a zero trust mindset on a platform, and ensuring that ports and services and assets and things like that are accounted for accordingly. We've seen it today where if somebody went out and changed a policy, you can roll that back. The SOAR is a tool that allows you to do that with an audited, recorded, supervised, approved process that now becomes evidentiary. If we do not do this and people are just hitting buttons and saying, I think it should go backwards because I feel like it's a Tuesday and today's the day, you are losing your liability coverage. You're risking your organization by making commands and doing things that are out of scope and out of legal recourse. It is very important to understand that. The 7 tenets of the model, we've heard these today. All data sources and computing are considered resources. Access to individualized sources on a per session basis. We have a clear problem of defining what is a session. A session in the VPN world is I've powered up my laptop, fired up a VPN client, and I'm in an environment and my session is overall to everything. In the application-driven world, I have an interaction of session to that platform. But then there's also the point that says a session can be me interacting with an HMI that is then doing something to a PLC. Those are sessionally controlled systems. So we need to understand scope of terminology. Dynamic policy. Again, you do not have dynamic policy when you look at facilities around the globe and you look at this case here that we're studying and saying, how many traffic signals do we have out there? How many smart systems in the streets do we have alone? And how are you going to take and dynamically give policy to them without a platform to manage it, audit, comply, and approve? Enterprise monitors and measures the integrity and security posture. The biggest problem we have in the industry, and CISA and others have come out and said, you must know your assets. For many of you that have walked a facility, for any of you that have walked your own data centers and see things zip tied to rails on racks, what is that? I don't know. A vendor put it in. They need it. Don't touch it. It's not connected to your network. It goes out a cellular network to their own environment. Is that an asset in your environment? Oh, absolutely. Do we understand the security posture and control? If I'm that plant manager and it works today and I've got other things, I'm not questioning it. I'm not pushing it. I don't have time. So assets are wonderful things to start to understand. But after you understand them, you now need to understand the depth of more than just it's a widget on my inventory. And all resource authentication and authorization are dynamic and strictly enforced before access is allowed. What does that really mean? You are logging into a system. You are logging into a resource. If I'm presented with a logon screen, when does that strict access begin? Is that by stating that I'm using basically HTTPS, encrypted traffic from my browser? Does it mean that I must have established a VPN to my laptop? Or does it mean as soon as my username and password are submitted to the platform? These are the interpretations that are being taken on the industry of when does that begin? Because I can get you to a jump box and then use common credentials on the back end and say, I strictly enforced you on the front end, but now on the back end, since it's a shared account, which are very, very common in OT, now I have to get my security policy at the level of that resource. There are ways to fight that, and there are ways to resolve that. Lastly, understanding your baseline. It's funny that the word baseline is not used in this statement right out of the document from NIST, but that is what we were talking about, a baseline for the environment. And that is critical because the state of the baseline tells you the state of the posture for an incident, an event, because if you do not know your baseline and a system starts doing something, how do you know if it's just a normal event or an incident where you're underneath attack? You need to understand your baseline. One key component here that I want to bring up, and this is right from your NIST guidance documents, control plane and data plane. Some technologies out there have one in the cloud and one in your environment, or both in the cloud, depending. In the platforms that I work with, that I've helped design, and that I recommend to the industry, the control and data plane are underneath your control. That way, we're not worrying when somebody says, my credentials in the cloud were compromised, and now I have a problem. If your credentials are not underneath your direct control and your data and resources, you do not have a control and data plane within your environment. There's a box around that for a reason. All the other things that influence that are tools that help you meet compliance, threat intelligence, identity management, but you need to control the box in the middle. The best practices that ICS, OT recommend, put out by CISA and others, incident response plan to disconnect systems. This is where I talk about the interfacing versus the integrating in the environment. If you cannot disconnect safely, effectively, and securely without risk to your OT environment, and it cannot be just calling somebody in the IT world and saying, I need you to change a firewall rule for me. IT controls generally the firewalls and the DMZ and higher. OT does not. If the entire organization, as we're in this scenario, is under a critical incident, where do you feel you fall in that OT ask of their environment? You need to have the ability to disconnect on your own. OT segmentation we've heard about, and we always must think AIC, not CIA. Lastly, safety first, always. This is where the cultural difference comes in. This is our challenge and our biggest challenge. The same glass, half full, half empty. The same glass, you need to patch those legacy systems because there's a patch available, versus I cannot patch that system. It will cause grievous harm if I do. The vendor controls that. I don't have a say in that. That system hasn't been powered down in 10, 15 years, are all things that you hear out in this space. As well as IT is not going to tell OT what the, excuse my French, F to do. Why is that? Because we're thinking CIA versus AIC. If you look at this from an IT perspective, it's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. If you look at it from an OT perspective, it's availability / safety, then integrity, and then confidentiality. When you're looking through the same lens at a different way, I tell people, it's like two people looking at the side at a 9 laying on the ground. And from one side, the guy goes, that's a 6. And from the other side, the guy goes, that's a 9. Both right. If they rotated around the number on the ground, they would see each other's side. You have to see the other side of the fence in an open discussion and mindset. This should look very familiar to people. This is the current state of secure remote access. All these different services that have grown and grown and grown. And now we have legacy solutions, critical systems, untrusted users, and they're all coming together and everybody just throws up a new conduit. This is not the way it's supposed to work. This is not what the true zero trust vision is about. This is a business model of efficiency by deficiency. What does that mean? It's efficient to just throw something else up, and it's deficient for me to take time and say, well, wait a minute, let me go back and see what's out there and let me see if I can reconfigure that. You're giving business efficiency basically a black eye. Throw something else in, let's get it up and running. We have uptime production to take care of. They're also not all controlled by one group. So as you can see, you have a mix. But the fundamentals of what securing access to this environment, which is where it really starts with zero trust, is strong access controls, connectivity, and oversight, and owning and controlling your own data and control plane within your bounds. If you have strong access controls, and then if you have strong connectivity controls, you now can have better oversight controls because they are filling in the proper data. If you had shared logins that people just walk up to with the username and password taped to a system, you do not know who that user was. You do not know if any risky actions were taken. And you do not have a full audit trail because even if you did, it would say Bob logged in, Bob logged out, Bob logged in, Bob logged out. How does that help anybody? But if I can multi-factor that user, even in a shared account, and make them log in with an individualized credential that they then access a safe and secure shared credential, now I can tie that back to the audited MFA'd user that logged into the platform, restrict their actions through policy like zero trust embraces, and now you have full audit trail as well as access logs. Supervision and session recording are key components of the OT world. In the IT world, they are really not. But one thing about supervised and recorded sessions, nobody has time to go back and look at them. That's why there's technologies and platforms out there that we're working with and we're doing ourselves that allow you to search SSH sessions to find out what commands were issued. So now you can go back and say, what is going on? Why did this happen? And look for who did that command to SU or change mod or other things. It is that critically important to have the fundamentals across your organization. Remote privileged access management. This is a new Gartner category. This is where we feel the state and the vision is going overall for the industry because it's tying all these key features together. Right now, it's disparate. We're going to add MFA here, but it doesn't cover everything. We're going to give you end user tools, but everybody's got their own app. We're going to give you zero trust for users, but then we don't take in consideration devices. So we now have the ability to put this entire model and vision together in what they're called remote privileged access management. It's taking the spaghetti, it's taking the user, the devices, providing strong identity and authentication, and it's allowing you to get to resources on the back end without change. There is no re-IPing. There is no worrying about those shared credentials being given to somebody so that TSA and others say, hey, if your shared credentials are given, you must turn around and change them. There is no doing that. They're vaulted, they're controlled, and it's all within your data and control plane. So how does it work with our technology and other technologies in the space? In this environment here, you can see three disparate different sets of users. Remote users, which can be contractors, remote offices, other people coming in. You have your IT users, generally, quote unquote, office users here. They are coming in the same way that the remote users would, or they can be coming in right through the edge in 3.5. Why is this important? Because if you look at this image here, you will notice that OT users are interacting directly with the system, and this is a reverse proxy architecture. That means that if the outside world in our scenario got completely disconnected, anything from level 3 up would be gone. Your OT users can functionally work in an electronic security perimeter where they are, or they can turn around and take a laptop and go right out to a device where our software is sitting and now access that infrastructure. The other thing you'll notice about this diagram that is key is notice that we have a Cyolo controlled firewall behind the IDAC. We've all talked about microsegmentation. Microsegmentation is wonderful until you get to your jumping off point. That jumping off point is generally a box that says you can SSH to this platform, and when you get there, you can do anything you want. You can go to this HMI and do anything you want. This is where by placing a firewall, and we're doing this right now with partners like Fortinet out there, where we have their virtual firewall that we can run right on our appliance with our software. That now, when I open up an application to a specific port on the back end after I've validated the user, I can now take that firewall and open that granular access for that port, for that application, for that user, and then couple that with things. So if they try to do a Modbus write and they're only allowed to read, we can stop that. The other thing that we can do with the platform is, if you notice, it's two-way communication on the back end of the environment. All these devices that are out at remote locations, traffic signals, water treatment facilities, gas valves, oil valves, whatever you want, serial devices. You can now take, because we have that outbound connection from the IDAC, and you can now feed that up through the edge, which is just an SNI gateway. No data exists in that. No data is kept in that. It is basically just a routing mechanism. But now you can send it up to your logs and alerts, which can then be fed into your SIM, which now can have an operator with human in the loop, look to see what's going on, and either through the API on our platform or through a SOAR, make an educated decision. Decisions such as, I just saw a new asset come on the network, I need to understand what it is, and if it meets my policy criteria. Do I have user controls around it? Do I have firewall rules in place? What is this? I need a user to get in just-in-time access. I'm going to take that user, create that user, and now give them access to one individualized application. And then when they are done, I'm going to limit and remove their access. Or a policy has changed in the environment. It has come up to me that it's changed. I'm now going to tie into change management if I have that capability, and through an operational process, go back and change that policy. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are trying to use the best of breed technology that we have implemented with customers across the asset management, AV, XDR, EDR, attack framework, policy enforcement, threat and mitigation, asset inventories, firewalls, you name it, and bring those tools to bear, those IT type tools, in a safe, controlled OT manner. I'll leave questions here for the end, but right now, I want to get to the real part of what we want to show you here. I actually could give somebody here, if they're available on the panel or other, I can give you a URL to show you that you have access to my environment through a handcrafted URL, if you'd like, but I can also demonstrate it myself. So right here, I have our portal. So I've logged into the system. I'm now into my WYSIWYG interface. Notice the applications I have access to in the environment. I have an operation control center. I have other business applications, a firewall, a console. And as we go down further, you will see other partners in the environment that we have in this area. So we have full capabilities to tie into other devices. I'm going to go to the control center. To prove this is live and not just in the middle of nowhere, there is my hand moving in front of this device. All the software, the firewalls, and everything else are running on the little black box in the corner there that remotely I can light up on my own. I also can take now and to show you the performance of the platform based on the thought of a threat comes in, a user has access, you can check that user and now deny. You can see that I have 3 applications granted here. If I launch an environmental application, and now I go to my control center and say, hey, I've got a vulnerability, a red light goes on that quickly. And to just lay out my architecture here, this is not me plugged into this unit. I'm showing you the distance and perspective where my laptop is going out through Wi-Fi up to our gateway for this demo in Ireland, back from Ireland through the internet to my home office where it comes in through my Fios networking, and then I jump it to a cellular modem. This is the box we're talking to sitting here on the rail. But if I have now an alert come into the system and I say, hey, I've got a vulnerability, and we go back and we see this user has environmental access. This is safe and efficient use of the environment and application. I can then clear the alert and go back to a green state that quickly. The tools and capabilities are here. Everything in this platform, including MFA, where now I'm going to be asked to MFA a second time at an individual application level, which I can put in right here. Now we'll show you the size of just how small this platform can be. This is the first IDAC I am on right here, OTENV. The other 2 which are tied to it for a high availability are down in the Carolinas. But 4 CPUs, 8 gig of RAM, all those applications on it, totally within your isolated boundary, where we tie identities, which can be local identities, or tied to an AD of any sort, Okta, Ping, AD, SAML, anything like that we can tie into, built to an application where these applications are given access based on people, process, technology. What does that mean? I can take a group of users that I've designated for this facility, give them access to applications as a group or individually. I then can set policies based on the application type. So whatever application I want to go into, I can decide what type of users can do it. If you notice over here, I can do supervision. The benefit is that I tie a user over to an application, and that is a strong multi-factored identity. And then we have features that allow you to do things such as time-based. Time-based as in they can come in Monday through Friday, do certain things. After that, the policy changes, whether recorded or supervised, and on a Sunday, they cannot. We can do policy integration, verifying with other sources, source IP and geolocation. And then based on the application, we can take parameters. The one really cool thing about the platform is that I can actually take this platform and now talk directly to an HMI or a PLC, as we're doing for some of our customers, where we have the PLC because it is so small sitting in a plant. Now I can put an IDAC that's just as tiny sitting in front of it. And when that user hits the gateway, they pass by the entire network infrastructure, tie right into that IDAC. They're isolated to only their user login, one application, can do things on that PLC, recorded and supervised, all through a web browser without anything else being needed to be installed on their system. So we are tying together the people, the process, technology, and have that fully built into a platform this small. As I said, this is not a demo of let me show you Cyolo. This is a functional understanding of the control plane and the data plane in one environment that now allows you to mitigate your risk, get down to those resources, MFA anywhere, even for legacy applications, and protect your environment in a zero trust manner. Any questions, or does this sort of understand the concept for people in the environment?
Kevin, I don't have any open questions in the Q&A right now.
Perfect.